Welcome back to our channel. Naomi stood frozen on the threshold, her chest tightening as her gaze locked onto the scene unfolding in Haley's living room. Every instinct in her body screamed betrayal, and yet, her mind raced through fragmented thoughts, trying desperately to process what she was witnessing. Haley's arms were wrapped around Isaiah with a familiarity that felt like an intrusion, like a knife sliding through Naomi's carefully constructed perception of reality. The sight ignited a furnace of anger within her, a searing heat that clawed up from her stomach, through her throat, and into the tips of her fingers. She wanted to scream, to confront, to shatter the delicate facade of warmth and laughter that she had long associated with Haley's home, but a deeper, more insidious fear anchored her to the doorway, fear that confrontation would unravel more than just what she could see. Her eyes traced the contours of their bodies pressed close together, noting the ease with which they leaned into each other, the subtle brush of skin that suggested a comfort Naomi had once believed belonged to her. Memories of moments she had shared with Haley flared like sparks against tinder, whispered confidences, shared secrets, promises of loyalty. Each recollection now felt like a betrayal, a reminder that trust could be so effortlessly eroded by desire and proximity. Naomi's pulse raced, each beat hammering the rhythm of a conflict she had no choice but to face. She felt her knees weaken, yet she remained rooted, a silent observer to the disintegration of her own assumptions, the collapse of a sense of security she had taken for granted. Isaiah, oblivious or indifferent, pressed closer, his hand grazing Haley's back with a casualness that stung Naomi more sharply than any deliberate malice could. The casual intimacy was a provocation, a revelation of hidden truths that Naomi had resisted acknowledging. Every thought spiraled: why Haley, why Isaiah, and why here? Layers of jealousy, fear, and indignation intertwined, forming a toxic haze that clouded her judgment and heightened every emotion to unbearable extremes. Her mind attempted to rationalize the scene, perhaps a moment misinterpreted, perhaps a gesture innocent to them but incendiary to her. But every attempt was drowned out by the visceral punch of betrayal, a truth she could neither ignore nor tolerate. Naomi's hands trembled at her sides, fists clenching and unclenching as her body fought to maintain control against the onslaught of raw emotion. Rage mingled with a deep, gnawing sorrow, a mournful awareness that people she had trusted could harbor desires and alliances she could not have anticipated. The room seemed to close in on her, walls pressing with the weight of her unspoken questions and the suffocating intensity of her gaze. She saw not just the physical closeness of Haley and Isaiah, but the intangible bonds they had forged in secrecy, bonds that excluded her, that denied her a role she had once assumed was immutable. The revelation was a wound, an intrusion that demanded response, yet any immediate action threatened to compromise the fragile dignity of all involved, including her own. Her mind flicked to past encounters, subtle signs she had brushed aside, lingering glances, offhand touches, laughter that seemed loaded with meanings she had failed to decipher. The cumulative weight of these moments now bore down with the force of inevitability. Naomi recognized a pattern that had been quietly forming, unnoticed until it erupted into the undeniable. Betrayal was not sudden, it was gradual, a series of choices and compromises, each small and seemingly inconsequential, that together created a rift impossible to ignore. Anger surged anew, more strategic this time, sharpening her thoughts, outlining a plan of confrontation that would expose not just the act, but the motivations behind it, compelling every participant to reckon with their choices. Haley's oblivious smile, the careless ease with which she rested against Isaiah, felt like a personal affront, an erasure of Naomi's role in the unspoken hierarchy of loyalty and friendship. Naomi's chest tightened, and her breathing became shallow, punctuated by the oscillation between the desire to flee and the imperative to act. She recognized the peril in hesitation, the danger in allowing the scene to continue unchallenged, yet she also understood the fragility of human connection, how one misstep could unravel relationships beyond repair. Each second stretched into an eternity, a test of restraint, and a crucible for her moral resolve. As Naomi observed, the complexity of human motivation became impossible to ignore. Desire, fear, need, ambition, all collided in the room, manifesting in the physical closeness of Haley and Isaiah. Naomi saw the contradictions writ large, Haley's loyalty shadowed by her attraction, Isaiah's intentions perhaps genuine yet tainted by opportunity. She recognized herself in them too, the capacity for compromise, for rationalization, for acting in ways that preserved self-interest at the expense of others. This mirrored recognition was infuriating, a reminder that betrayal was as much a reflection of personal weakness as it was a deliberate act by another. The room seemed to pulse with tension, the air charged with the unspoken. Naomi's internal struggle intensified, a tempest of indignation and moral calculus. Should she confront them now, reveal the depth of her anger and the extent of her knowledge? Or should she retreat, collect evidence, plot a response that would force accountability without leaving herself vulnerable to derision or dismissal? Each option bore consequences, each path a potential minefield of escalating conflict. Naomi understood that once action was taken, nothing would return to the state of naive security she had known before crossing the threshold. Her vision blurred slightly as a surge of frustration collided with a wave of despair. She realized that she was witnessing not a simple moment of intimacy, but the culmination of choices, both conscious and unconscious, made over weeks, months, perhaps years. The knowledge was heavy, suffocating, yet it also provided clarity, the reality of human imperfection, the inevitability of conflict when desires clash, the impossibility of maintaining absolute control over others' actions. Naomi felt both powerless and empowered simultaneously, a paradox that only heightened the intensity of her reaction. In a sudden, almost involuntary movement, Naomi stepped back from the doorway, allowing a shadow to fall across her face, obscuring her presence. She observed them now through a lens sharpened by anger and strategic thought, cataloging every gesture, every subtle expression, every nuance that could later serve as ammunition in the inevitable reckoning. The scene before her, though intimate and private for them, became a battlefield for her mind, a rehearsal for confrontation, a crucible in which her own moral and emotional limits would be tested. Time stretched, each heartbeat a drum of potential catastrophe. Naomi's body quivered, a mix of adrenaline and anticipation surging through her veins. She felt the pulse of opportunity, the looming inevitability of decision, intervene, expose, retaliate, or withdraw. Each choice carried a weight far greater than the moment itself, threatening to reshape alliances, trust, and the very structure of her relationships. Her thoughts flickered rapidly, imagining outcomes, calculating risks, and acknowledging the potential for irreversible damage. The room, once a space of warmth and comfort, now resembled an arena, charged with unspoken truths and latent conflict. Naomi's emotions became a storm, each element feeding into the next. Anger fueling strategy, fear sharpening perception, sorrow compelling empathy, indignation driving moral clarity. She realized the act she was witnessing was not simply a betrayal of friendship or loyalty, but a mirror reflecting the vulnerabilities inherent in all human relationships, the ease with which trust can be undermined, the fragility of assumptions, the perilous gap between perception and reality. She understood that the choices she would make in the next moments could escalate the situation beyond recognition, igniting reactions as unpredictable as the human heart itself. As Naomi lingered, torn between confrontation and observation, Haley and Isaiah remained unaware of the storm brewing outside the room. The physical closeness that had provoked her initial anger now became a symbol of complex motivations, of unspoken desires and hidden conflicts. Naomi's mind traced the path that had led them here, reconstructing conversations, gestures, and moments of choice that had set the stage for this scene. She saw both opportunity and threat in every detail, every glance, every touch. Her anger, once raw and elemental, transformed into something more potent, a deliberate, calculated intensity that demanded recognition and accountability. By the time Naomi finally stepped away from the threshold, her body trembling with the residue of fury and anticipation, she understood that the confrontation she would orchestrate had to be flawless. It would not be enough to express anger, she would need to expose motives, challenge assumptions, and force a reckoning that left no room for evasion. Her mind was a battlefield, each thought a strategic maneuver, each emotion a weapon to be wielded in the delicate balance of human conflict. The room behind her remained alive with the unacknowledged intimacy, but for Naomi, it had transformed into the epicenter of a drama far larger than the moment itself, a crucible in which loyalty, desire, and morality would clash, leaving no participant untouched. In that suspended moment, Naomi realized that what she had seen was not just a scene of betrayal, but an inflection point. Choices made here would ripple outward, affecting alliances, reshaping perceptions, and challenging the very foundations of trust. She felt the intoxicating thrill of power, the power to expose, to judge, to force clarity, but also the crushing weight of responsibility, for every action she might take carried consequences that could not be undone. The emotional tempest within her was now both a weapon and a prison, a duality that mirrored the very scene she had witnessed. Her mind, relentless and unyielding, began to map the possibilities, subtle manipulations, timed revelations, orchestrated confrontations designed to elicit truth without sacrificing her own position. She visualized the shock, the disbelief, the defensive postures of Haley and Isaiah when faced with undeniable evidence of choice and intent. Naomi imagined the recriminations, the shifting alliances, the raw exposure of vulnerabilities that had previously been hidden behind polite smiles and casual gestures. Every mental simulation increased the intensity of her resolve, cementing her role not as a passive observer, but as an active participant in the unfolding drama. By the time the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across Haley's living room, Naomi had made a decision. She would not retreat, but neither would she act impulsively. She would wait, gather, and strategize, ensuring that when the time came, her actions would be unassailable, precise, and devastating in their clarity. The scene she had witnessed had ignited not only her anger, but also her understanding of the complex interplay of desire, loyalty, and betrayal. Naomi's heart continued to race, her thoughts a tangled web of calculation and emotion, but beneath it all lay a singular clarity. The future of their relationships, fragile as it was, would now pivot on choices that demanded courage, cunning, and the willingness to embrace the consequences of confronting hidden truths.